Welcome to Deconversations, a rather excellent podcast if you're listening, and a webinar if you're watching, discussing all things related to medical devices decontamination. Brought to you by Dan Cole, the instrument maker, Matthew Pescott, entrepreneur and former sterile services manager, and Pavel de Sternberg-Stylovsky, a research and development engineer.
Welcome to Helen Campbell, who's kindly agreed to join us on this episode of Deconversations. So Helen has been working in decontamination for, I've got to watch what I say years-wise here, from looking at your LinkedIn, the last sort of 15 years, longer, Helen?
I worked in the NHS in decontamination for 19 and a half years.
There we go.
Wow.
Okay, and obviously some very responsible positions at Hampshire NHS hospitals. So that was Winchester and Basingstoke, covering both those.
Yeah, Winchester and Basingstoke, and then Portsmouth.
Okay, great. And then obviously more recently Portsmouth, and now you're the chair of the IDSC for education. Sorry, director of education for IDSC. More correctly. Yeah. Okay. Could you give us just a bit of background about what that role entails, if that's okay?
What, director of education?
Yes. Yeah.
It's sort of coordinating and working with healthcare science and other external organisations to organise sort of formal training, really, and to get training accredited to levels. Sure.
Okay. Because I think the biggest change I've seen recently was your profession, the move over to the sort of more science-based role and obviously recognition for that. Would that be correct?
That's correct. In May 2013, Jeff Shogan managed to get us moved over to healthcare scientists. Unfortunately, not all trusts have moved people over to that. I know that Unison was involved with that and was very keen to get staff moved over, but I think there's very few trusts within the country that actually have moved their staff over to healthcare scientists.
Right. Okay. And is a lot of that to do with the training behind it and the qualification behind the profession in getting that recognition?
No, it was recognised that it was a scientific job. Scotland became healthcare scientists in May 18.
Right.
So we've got, out of the 4 countries within the United Kingdom, we've got 2 that are healthcare scientists. We are at present working with Wales to get qualifications and try to move those over to the scientific forum as well. And that allows qualifications like the apprenticeship and funding for them through the levy.
Okay, excellent. And obviously you've got a long background in decontamination and sterile services. Obviously we've got a few questions to run through, and one of mine really was, how did you get into it? Which I think is always a great question, and obviously one that I've heard Matthew's background really before on it, but it'd be great to hear that from yourself.
Yeah, I got into decontamination accidentally. I had 3 sort of early teenage or young sort of 9-10-year-old. I was also a full-time carer for my mother who had schizophrenia. And I worked in a wholesale plant nursery, running the wholesale side, selling to large nurseries sort of within the south of England. My mother then had an accident and had to have part of her leg amputated, which meant that I was unable to look after her and she had to go into a home. At that point, I sort of, with children being older, I wanted a career for myself and I wanted to stretch myself. I'd already done GCSE maths because I failed that at school, and thought that any job I needed, I had to have a maths O-level for. I then applied for 5 jobs that were advertised in those days in the paper, something that's not happening nowadays. I got interviews for all 5, and the first one I went to was for sterile services. I got that interview on a Wednesday and they offered me the job on the Friday. So I then cancelled all the other interviews because I then changed career.
Fantastic.
I started off as a technician, knowing nothing, in a basement with pass-through machines that you walked past to get into the clean area from the dirty area. But I think it was that I was interested in learning. I'd been a carer for sort of probably 15 years. I'd had children. I'd worked in the nursery where I'd had to learn about and the times of germinations and planning and that sort of thing. And I just felt the need to learn and stretch myself. So I was interested in what happened. I know that the supervisor and manager that I had at the time, I was asking lots of questions to, and they put me with an engineer who I asked lots of questions about sterilisation and autoclaves. And after the second week, he gave me a manual and said, there, if you want to know something, read that. So I took it home over the weekend, went back on the Monday with questions. And he went, I didn't actually mean read it. And that's the start. It just hooked me.
Yeah. I mean, there can't be too many jobs that have such a wide variety of expertise needed, can there? For everything from instruments to the sterilisation, how to load the washers, how to obviously ensure that the sterilisers are safe and running correctly. So, I mean, how do you even start to sort of comprehend getting your head around all of those different factors?
I think it's really difficult. And I think that as a manager, what you have to remember is that you're at the cutting edge a lot of the times. Like with protein detection, everything's changing all the time. There's new methods coming out. You've got to evaluate them. You've got to look at them. You've got to decide whether your trust can financially purchase things. You've got to put business cases together. You've got to go with your instincts and what you think and what you believe for the best for the patient and for the best for your staff. Everything is constantly changing. Like CJD came along, with the protein detection. There's going to be other things that come along. We don't know what we don't know, and I think that's the important thing within decontamination. A few years ago, we didn't even know that protein could cause problems, kept on instruments and cause problems with patients in the future, and the traceability of it. We don't, I think that the main thing is we don't know what we don't know. And we're always sort of looking. Sorry. Somebody's me. It's just really varied and really interesting. And I think you've got to be open and have a thirst for knowledge.
Yeah,
I was wondering. Sorry, Dan. You mentioned that you were hooked once you sort of got into the decontamination space. I was wondering whether there was anything specific that you found particularly interesting. Was it more the sort of the organization of the place, because there is a bit of an art of actually setting up the department in such a way that operates properly, or was it more the sort of scientific or technical side of decontamination that you found particularly interesting?
I think the part that I found interesting initially was the scientific bit, and learning about the reasons why you did things, what thermal disinfection was, the AO factor, the changing from thermal disinfection from 85 degrees to 90, which happened, within the country. And then really, when I started to manage, it was more that staff out there come in with virtually no qualifications, and it's really unfair that they can't get on. Personally, we've one of my daughters applied for nursing. She got turned down from a university purely on the grounds that she was dyslexic, and told that she couldn't go into nursing because she wouldn't be able to do a degree, which I felt was total discrimination. We took that through our MP, and questions got asked in Parliament, and she was accepted at a different university. She's been nursing now for 10 years and received promotion and is doing really well. But why are our staff discriminated against? Because they don't have qualifications. We need the qualifications out there, and we need to highlight that sterile services is a career. People don't know about us. When I moved to Portsmouth, we started going to their open days and doing displays, and it was amazing. Even the nurses within the trust didn't know what HSDU did. We had tours of the department. it's a hidden industry. Sort of cleaners are seen because they go around the hospital, they go around wards and they talk to people. But when you're cleaning instruments, you're not seen. You're a back service that no one knows anything about.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think certainly more recognition, but interestingly, in the previous episode, we had Jamie Russell from North Devon on, and it was great to hear his story, the way he'd, again, seemingly sort of stumbled into it, but now was just in this position that he's just taken on as much information as he possibly can by, you know, visiting all the exhibitions, listening to the seminars, and really immersing himself in it, which sounds like sounds like that was your attitude and initially, just to take it all on board. Matthew, have you got anything you would like to ask Helen?
Yeah, basically, I agree with Helen 100%. I've also worked in a few basements, and most of the nurses didn't even know we were there. Although when I was at the Royal Free, we had a very good nurse educator in theatres, and she insisted that every theatre nurse it was the TSSU at the time, spent a week in TSSU as part of their theatre training. And it was fantastic because they really enjoyed it and they got a real understanding of what we did. But I totally agree with Helen. We used to call it the Cinderella service. I'm assuming you've used that term as well, Helen. So.
Yeah.
I just got a few hopefully quick questions. I was just curious about how you've managed to continue the education during lockdown. What sort of mediums have you been using?
We're at the moment sort of working with healthcare science to get the apprenticeships up and running, and to encourage people to do the apprenticeship, the level 2 and the level 4. And actually, while we've had lockdown, we've been working on the TC technical certificate and getting that levelled. So we're working with SQA with that at the moment, which is the Scottish awarding body. So the majority of time, I think people don't see the background work that needs to go in, but when you're trying to get a qualification accredited, you have to do things like a quality manual, you have to have equal opportunities and all that sort of thing, and that's what we've been working on during lockdown.
Right. And I was just curious that if you have been have you been doing any sort of Zoom type education, or is it just you just put in the structures in place?
We're putting the structures in place at the moment, and I think that a lot of departments have had staff moved from their departments when they weren't busy out into the general hospital. So it's very difficult for people to do meetings. I know as a branch we've done Teams meetings. We had our last meeting via Teams, and I know a lot of other branches are doing that, and that seems to be working well. But my main push is to get the TC accredited, because we've got a level 2, we've got a level 4, and we need a level 3, which is equivalent to A-level standards. So hopefully within the next few months we should be there, and we should be broadcasting the fact that we do have a qualification that is levelled, and that is what we're working on.
Okay,
excellent. Pavel, you've got your hand up.
I found a feature over here to actually raise my hands when someone else is talking. So I wanted to pick up on one thing that you mentioned, Helen, that you've been sort of going proactively advertising the roles in sterile services and sort of trying to recruit people as well to those positions. I was wondering, how do you sort of catch the imagination of especially young people? How do you attract them to sterile services, and what's the promise for them at the moment to actually get them hooked?
It is really, really difficult to get people hooked on sterile services and to get young people from school knowing. And what we need to do, once we've got the career structure in place, and that's going to be through the scientific side, the School of Healthcare Science, we need to broadcast that there is a career, that people out there. So we will need to go to career events and that sort of thing. But we need to work with the healthcare science community so that not only are we publicising sort of pharmacy and that sort of thing, but sterile services comes into it as well.
Perfect.
Helen, do you think there's an opportunity coming out of COVID with obviously, well documented job losses around the country to really have a push, as relaunching of this industry, and obviously what it means for somebody who's looking to change career? Because it sounds to me like once you've created this technical certificate, that somebody potentially looking to change a job could come in, and there's a technical certificate for them to train to and to work to, and to obviously to move into a really, really valuable industry.
I totally agree with you. I think it is a good opportunity. The first thing we need to do is to get the qualification levelled, which is what we're working on at the moment. As soon as that's levelled, we'll be able to move forward, and we'll be broadcasting the fact. And it's finding where to broadcast it, who to go to. The apprenticeship scheme is out there already. It's been out there for 2 years. But when you look at how many people have been through endpoint assessment and finished the course, there aren't a huge number. It's, there's the hospitals out there aren't using the levy to fund technicians through sterile services. There are some doing it, but there aren't that many. There's a private organisation that's doing the training, but also when I was at Portsmouth, we did it in-house. So we did it through a local college and through our education department. I know how difficult it can be. I know what the 20% off job training is like, and it is difficult. It's difficult for people when they're short-staffed and theatres are working flat out to allow that 20% training. And it's not only the modules on decontamination that the staff need to know, but it's the 5 core modules in the level 2. And once they've got the level 2, they're competent within the department. They then need to know the theory to be able to go on to the level 4, which the level 4 is much more advanced, and they need to know the parameters of the washers and the sterilisers and what legislation that the decontamination sits under.
Just one sort of maybe a word of explanation, because we do tend to have people from around the world actually watching this this webinar. Would you be able to just very, very briefly explain the sort of differences between the levels and how one gets to obtain those?
Yes. A level 2 is basically GCSE or O-level standards. Sort of being the age I am, I talk about O-levels, not GCSEs, but that's so you could take somebody on as an apprentice straight away from the street, so to speak, and put them through an apprenticeship, which is a 12-month course and then a 3-month preparing for endpoint assessment. They're then competent to work in that area. Then the technical certificate we're hoping will be a level 3, which would mean it would be A-level standard, and a level 4 is sort of first year degree standard. So it's moving up through the scales, and then we're working with healthcare science to get higher levels as well.
Fantastic, thank you for that.
No, that's excellent. I mean, there's clearly a really broad structure for anyone looking to come into the industry. Interested you saying about the apprenticeships, and I think one thing that we found as an industry that's over historically been reliant on apprenticeships. We've always done them through obviously the manufacturing and the repairing side of the instruments, but more recently we've sort of been working in the office and administration and other areas. But it's the thing I found a challenge is initially, I think, getting apprentices sort of work ready. So it's regardless of before they even touch tray wraps or anything like that, just the basics of how to conduct yourself in a workplace. The fact you've got to turn up every day, and even if you've got a cold, although at the moment that's a bit contentious, just those sort of skills. I mean, is that something that you're addressing as a sort of module, if you like, or is that just part of the apprenticeship?
That is part of the apprenticeship, and you've got the NHS contribution and all that sort of thing. You've got about 115 units to choose from, of which decontamination is 5 units. So unit 13 is an introduction to decontamination, you've got 97, 98, 99 and 100. 99 and 100 are endoscopy, which is important. So you've got 97 and 98, which are decontamination. It is interesting because if you do it in-house, you have to write your own booklets and you have to work out how you cover each aspect of each module and what additional modules you need to have your candidates doing. For instance, sort of you could have anatomy, which is quite an interesting one I think that apprentices actually need to do when they're doing decontamination, because they can then identify what area of the body the instruments are used in. And as I said, there's 5 core modules, 1 to 5, which are sort of the basics, and you have to do English and maths as well. So you have to achieve at least a level 1, but preferably get a level 2 in English and maths. So there's quite a lot to the apprenticeship that managers have to be aware of within the 20% off job training. And it's almost easier to get an external company to come in and do that for you. But there's very few external companies that are actually doing it at the moment.
Okay, that's interesting. And Matthew, I know you had a question around technology again, didn't you, and social media and how that might work moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, what I've discovered for myself is, since that we've been sort of forced to use these type of mediums like Zoom and Teams, that education, I feel, could be enhanced by the fact that it's very difficult to get people from around the country into one place. So even if, because I think with Eastwood Park, I think they need to maybe look at more sort of online education, because I don't know if you guys are aware, but they'll be opening their new training.
I was
so,
to see that.
Yeah, and it's looking pretty impressive. So hopefully, they will take on board a more of an online type offering, because people, being able to physically get to Eastwood Park. One of the questions I was going to ask is, are you aware of a company called Beyond Clean?
I've heard of it. I don't know much in the way of detail about it.
Yeah, I mean, they had a chat with Alan Clark at the World Forum, the World Sterile Services Forum, and basically Beyond Clean are one of these type of companies that the IDSC could, work with to enhance the online training. I mean, they're an American-based company, but they are moving into Europe and around the world. And when I spoke to Alan, I just thought that was a possible, way of sort of supporting your efforts.
I think we need to look at everything, and we've moved the technical certificate online now, so it's an online course, so all the candidates can access it online. It's no longer sort of paper-based as it used to be, so submitting assignments and that sort of thing is much more easier for candidates and more COVID-friendly.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Excellent. I have a question, because you mentioned also that part of the preparation of the training is done in-house, and you have to go as far as actually preparing materials for it. And I wanted to sort of look into more technical aspects of what's happening on that sort of level. And I was wondering, what are we preparing the future technicians and then future managers of departments in terms of the technology that is coming in? Is there anything in the curriculum that really touches on how far we've changed the sterile services already and where we are going in general, so they can also look in the future from the perspective of the technologies that they will need, that they will help, the technologies that will help them run the departments more effectively?
I think that the level 2 is very much based at technician level and entry technician level. The technical certificate does provide links to standards like the HTMs and that sort of thing, and gives links to some industries that have been working with us to allow us to put links onto their websites, which we're always keen to do. So, you know, the more industries that will help us and put links in so we can link into their training is always helpful. And the level 4 is, as I say, run by the school, and that is, again, a slightly higher level. We are at the moment working with the school to sort of work at degree level and that sort of thing, and that's obviously going to be run by a university.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you.
Okay, one thing I'd mentioned in my around, obviously there seems to be a bit more nowadays collaboration with industry, and obviously, you know, I think industry has a bit of responsibility to help support education. And is it about a bit of a balance as well? Because obviously, you know, as objective as you try to be when you're training, I suppose, there's always going to be the fact that if it's a commercial company, they may have underlying, obviously, you know, interest in it. So what's the thought around that? Is it about, you know, advising people who are trained in the industry to sort of be balanced and to look at the whole picture?
I think it is. We're asking for sort of information that isn't specifically for, say, one washer or something like that. It might be a washer provider that provides some training, but it's generic rather than specific for that manufacturer. I think also it's important that you can have two manufacturers giving almost identical training, but because they've got different machines, you'll come in from a slightly different viewpoint. And I think it's important that you allow candidates, especially when they're doing things like the TC, to go and investigate. So you want to tell them, you know, go and look at this manufacturer, click this link, you can go on and watch it, and then the manufacturer can put more links in if they wish, so the candidate can go and look at what they want to find out. We can't, if you start saying you can only look at this and this and this, you're restricting education, and everybody learns in a different way. Some people learn by sort of visual, others by the hearing method, others have to do it and see it and write it. So we've got to appreciate that there's so many different methods of learning, and that's what we've got to do. We can't restrict learning. We've got to open it up so that we try to get the technician and the supervisor to question. You know, the most important thing, if they think something's wrong or not 100% or don't understand something, they've got to feel free that they can question why it's being done.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree, and that certainly would seem to be the right approach. And actually, from Jamie Russell, as I mentioned, the previous episode we did, that's I think something we established with him, that he would go to every company that he could just to sort of, you know, form his own judgment. And actually, it might be something completely, just something that company is an expert in that another's not, that you just pick up that little gem that really is going to be a benefit. Pavel, you have a question?
Yeah, just sort of dwelling on this subject, I was wondering whether IDSC as an institution, or you from your personal experience, have you identified particular areas in the education that are problematic from the perspective of actually passing on the right knowledge? And I simply wanted to find out whether there are still areas that I would say maybe more materials or different approaches would be welcome.
I think it's very difficult for units that have had no education for managers to bring it in. I think there's a lack of understanding within education within the NHS that decontamination is there, and I think that's our job to push that. And we need to wait until we've got that career structure. And once we've got that career structure, we need to go out to whether it's each trust or each region and actually either talk to them or email them with the requirements and what is available. It's very difficult for managers that don't hold qualifications to push technicians and supervisors to have qualifications, because then supervisors and technicians might be more highly qualified than the manager. That is going to happen as qualifications become available. It's nothing to worry about. You've got to be what do I want to say? You've got to be secure in your own skin and be willing to think that some people are more intelligent than you. You know, you learn it when you have kids. Kids sort of very quickly expand beyond your knowledge and tell you things you didn't know. You've got to understand that in the workplace. So not only have you got to listen to industry and people outside, but you've got to listen to your own staff as well. And if you fired them with that enthusiasm to go and read around the subject, they will come back with questions that you don't necessarily know the answers to. And then that's your job to find the answers.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, I think that's a really great, passionate answer and attitude for it. When you mentioned the different learning styles. One of my questions is around: do you think there are, looking at you're across the industry and at your colleagues who have been in similar managerial positions, do you think there are common traits that people who have been in decontamination manager jobs and sterile services managers jobs have? Do you think are there common traits that you could therefore take back to schools and then try and identify in people?
I think there is something, and I think that not probably for this time, but there is research that needs to be done into it. You look at the majority of managers, they have very few qualifications. They probably came out of school having been failed by education. And yet they're passionate, they're intelligent, they want to do the best they can. And they've read around the subject and they know their stuff, but they're frightened of failure.
Yeah. No, I think it's obviously for me, if you look at the different and the passion across the industry and anyone who knows the industry knows how obviously how passionate a lot of the people in the managerial positions and that you meet at the conferences are. And there must be a way when you look at things like careers days when you're trying to identify what job is right for somebody or what industry, because it's a very sort of pragmatic, hands-on subject. But there's also this sort of deep science based approach to it as well, isn't there? So it's very interesting.
It's getting people in that have got, say, degrees or qualifications, and then educating them into the industry so that they're our future. They're the ones that are going to be able to go and delve into science and question on a scientific level. And that's what we need. And we haven't got that at the moment. Sort of in very few departments do we have people that are coming up through with scientific backgrounds, being able to talk the scientific language. And does
that cause, as people become more qualified, does that cause more sort of political issues with regards to sort of banding in NHS hospitals? If somebody does X job and has got such and such qualification, and then someone in sterile services has got a degree or a master's, is that something that needs to be overcome?
I think it will come in the future, and I think that decontamination will become a higher priority within hospitals.
Great.
We can definitely see that trend simply from the amount of technology that we have in decontamination. So we'll have to get people who are well qualified to operate, diagnose those new pieces of equipment or new technology. So there's definitely a trend to look at better, highly skilled workforce to handle that, because we all know that we are going to see more and more technology here. So there's definitely that element coming through.
I think you also need to remember that managers, sort of, I always say about myself that I never grew past the age of 3 because I never stopped asking why. And that's really the thing, that everybody within the industry needs to keep asking why. Because if you're given something, an instrument, with robotics becoming more and more popular, say a robotic instrument that comes in and they go, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and you say why, then you actually understand the process and you can explain it to staff. You can give training to staff on how it's done, and people won't cut corners. If they don't understand, people will cut corners because that's human nature.
That's it. I think when we were doing a tray inspection at a hospital recently, and we saw some damaged insulation on a monopolar faucet, and sort of highlighted it to the manager or the supervisor who's on duty. They didn't see it as an issue, because I don't think they understood what the consequences were. And this, to me, is where you need this like joined up. I know, with theatres and sterile services, some sort of at least collaboration at some point. So there is that, certainly for theatres, the understanding what you guys do, but also, and I think you mentioned anatomy as being a really good module to take. If you're handling a tray, you've got to know the basics of where it's going to be used. For instance, handling a tray of ophthalmic instruments with a delicacy there where they're going to be used versus a hip tray, which is going to have a mallet and chisels and everything on it. There's a need for context, isn't there, really? And I think there's certainly further and further education to develop on those sort of areas.
Yeah.
No, I think that. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think that the level 2 is the basic that sort of all technicians should have, and it might be a few years or many years before it becomes routine that people start them as an apprentice and get them through. But I think that's the way the industry needs to go.
Yeah,
certainly.
Yeah,
the one thing that I had in my mind now that when Dan mentioned trays is again, we are seeing more and more complex instruments, and some of them require specific trays or even the setup of trays, and that is becoming also a major issue in terms of having that huge quantity of different types of instruments, and being able to comprehend that this particular instrument requires a special treatment. So how is that sort of envisaged in the training? Is this something that simply comes with experience, or is there anything that we could do up front to actually prepare people for that?
I think it's really difficult because I think that you've got very different people working in sterile services. You've got the people that have been there for 40 years that we've always done it like this. This is how we're always going to do it. And you've got the youngsters coming in that are actually interested. And that's where they need to know why. And that's the important thing. If you know why you're doing something, you can then question if somebody's not doing it. Or if something doesn't come apart, you can say, well, why doesn't this come apart? How can you prove that it's clean? I remember when I was a supervisor having instruments in and going, well, why don't they come up? The manufacturer saying, or the rep saying they don't need to. And I'm saying, well, can I soil test them? And they're going, oh, that might be a bit of a problem. But why is it a problem? If I'm interested and I want to know if it will clean, the thing about loan sets coming in containers, people question, do the instruments need to come out? Well, if staff can challenge and say, can I do soil testing on it to ensure that it cleans properly? What's the problem with that?
This is absolutely amazing, and it would be fantastic if we could somehow induce that level of curiosity, so people actually start asking those questions on a daily basis. Why are we doing this? Why this cycle looks like that, or why this and that needs to happen before this happens? So it would be fantastic if there was a way to maybe even present that as a part of the training, that this is something that will be expected of future technicians to be inquisitive, to actually question practices and ask the simple question why.
Yeah, it is. You're never going to get everybody that wants to do it, but you've got to, and that's going to be up to managers to pick the staff that they see asking the questions, the difficult staff that ask the difficult questions, and encourage them to continue to ask them.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, I mean, it's been brilliant. We've had some excellent questions and answers, and I think it's just your passion for the industry resonates through. And I think moving forward, it sounds like with the technical certificate and the different levels that are coming in, there should be great attraction to the industry for people looking for a new career or changing to career, or even to develop the career they're currently in. So thank you, Helen, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Appreciated.
You have been listening to Deconversations. Join us soon for new episodes.